Hi, I'm Tony Fair, founder of Victorian Grooming Company. Is your beard feeling dry or the skin underneath itchy? Maybe you'd rather soften and tame your beard instead. Our classic collection of beard oils, balms, and soaps will leave your beard looking, feeling, and smelling amazing. And if you prefer shaving, our pre-shave oils and shave soaps will give you a smooth and razor burn-free shave. Handmade in Edmonton with natural ingredients. Visit victoriangrooming.com.
Black China, baby.
Yeah, we know we don't play around. We know the podcast in Shanghai. There's only one guy on my side, and his name is Craig. Check him out. Skinny OG, boy. If you got a story to tell, call Craig. The government been checking your mail. Just call Craig. Your ex-girlfriend just fell down a well. Call Craig. They say they about to put you in jail. Just call Craig. Call Craig. Call Craig. Hey, you go and tell Craig. Call Craig. Call Craig. Hey, you go and tell Craig. Call Craig. Call Craig. Hey, you go and tell Craig. The only podcast that's ringing the bell. Call Craig. Yeah, boy, you know who to find. Just go tell him your story. It'll be fine. You know, have a good time. Yeah, this your boy Skinny OG. One love, big up to my boys. Tell Craig your story. Check him out now.
Hello everyone, Craig here. Welcome to another edition of the podcast, Tell Craig Your Story. Today we sit down with none other than Rob Dietrich, master distiller and blender of Metallica's Blackened Whiskey, and a true innovator in the spirits world. From his military background to backstage stories with one of the biggest bands on the planet, Rob shares how music and craftsmanship collide in a bottle. You'll hear about the science behind sonic-enhancement, how he keeps Metallica's signature whiskey rocking around the globe, and what it means to hold legacy with every pour. Whether you're a whiskey connoisseur or a die-hard music fan, you don't want to miss this one. Now, Rob is also a part of the Metallica Takeover, where he has his live events. But before we go, please go to our website. We're at Podbean. Tell Craig Your Story at podbean.com. We have a link tree there which tells you where Tell Craig Your Story podcast is streaming. We are on all the major streaming services. At Tell Craig Your Story. For our Chinese listeners, we have WeChat, Bilibili, TikTok, and RedNote. We also have a YouTube account. Make sure you're subscribing and liking to get all the latest updates. All right, here we go. This is my chat with Rob on Tell Craig Your Story podcast.
Tell Craig your story.
Hi, Rob. How you doing this morning? Your time?
Good, Craig. Good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, good to see you too. As we were just saying, very, very jealous that you're on tour with Metallica at the moment. So for some of the new listeners, tell us a little bit about the Metallica Takeover and how you're involved with that.
I mean, I have to tell you, it's just very humbling and very exciting to be a part of the Metallica family the way that I get to be. You know, I have a great rapport with the band members, and they've been incredible to work with for all these years. I am their master distiller, make their whiskey. I also was very fortunate to come up with a crackpot scheme to create a cigar with James Hetfield, and that was born out of COVID. You know, James lives about an hour and a half away from me here in Denver, Colorado. Right. And we spent a lot of time social distancing, smoking cigars on his back deck, looking up at the Colorado Rockies, the Rocky Mountains. And I've been friends with Jonathan Drew for many, many years, and he owns Drew Estate Cigars. Right. And so I came up with this idea I asked James, I was like, what do you think about making our own cigar? And he said, that sounds great. You know, he loves smoking cigars. So I talked to Jonathan Drew, and we created a cigar together. So now we've got the whiskey and the cigars, and I've been traveling with the band to promote, promote the cigars and the whiskey wherever the band is touring, and wherever the whiskey is and wherever the cigars are, that's where I'm going to be. So I'll be in Nashville this weekend.
Yes.
And pretty much the rest of the U.S. tour. I will be in Australia as well. I think that's happening. So.
Oh, fantastic! I was just about to ask that if you were coming down there. Have you ever been to Australia before?
I have not. It's been on my bucket list since high school. I tried to do the student exchange program. It didn't work out for me. Yeah. And once I get to Australia, I only have one more continent left, and that's Antarctica. So,
there you go.
That's gonna have to be a focused attempt, I think. But I'm really looking forward to visiting Australia. I've wanted to my whole life.
So excited on behalf of all the Metallica fans. We've been waiting a very, very long time for the band to come down now. So it's going to be some really great shows. Just getting back to the smoking the cigars, I haven't seen so many people smoking cigars in the mosh pit ever, and especially on James's side as well. Like they're like all four corners of the stage. All the fans are like smoking the cigars and trying to get James to light the cigars for them. I've never seen so many cigar smokers ever. So whatever you're doing there, you're doing something right there.
It's pretty fun to see, and that's all just natural. That's just James being James. He's such a good human being and such a good guy that he knows it gives people a thrill. And it is funny to see people there waiting to get their cigars lit.
That's it. They're trying to hold their phone as well as the cigar, and so it's a good little multitasking. That's it, exactly. So again, thank you very much for your time. I know you're a very, very extremely busy man, but I do appreciate your time. So let's go back. Let's go right back to where you're from. Now, correct my pronunciation, but I do believe you were born in Olathe, Colorado.
Olathe, and I wasn't born there. I grew up there.
Oh, you grew up there, right? Okay.
Yeah. Olathe. It is one that gets that's hard to understand sometimes that pronunciation, but it's a very small town, agricultural community. It was mostly corn and orchards. Where I grew up. Beautiful part of Colorado. The San Juan Mountains kind of as the backdrop there, and I really was very fortunate to grow up in the country and have a lot of the freedom of being raised somewhat feral.
Yeah. Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, I love it. I grew up, riding dirt bikes, and I was always outside, always doing something outside, and living out in the country. I was just always traipsing through the woods and getting in trouble out there.
In my research, I do believe that one of your parents' things was that you didn't have a TV in your house. Right. So how was your record collection then?
Yeah, my folks didn't believe in having a TV in the house, and so I was a voracious reader. I read a lot of books.
Sorry, Robert, was that a religious thing or just something that they, passed on from generations? Or
I think it was my mom was, she was Jehovah's Witness. She was raising my sister and I as Jehovah's Witness. My dad did not believe in that religion, so he was not Jehovah's Witness. So there was kind of a dichotomy there in the growing up, but I think it was more of a choice that, my parents felt that it was a distraction, and that it was just, they called it the idiot box, and that it was just, it was just there to suck your time away. And so I'm very grateful for that now. I don't even have a TV in my house. Like I watch TV. I have, I watch movies and things like that, but I tend to lean towards music and reading and that sort of thing. So the record collection, my parents collected a lot of vinyl records. And so we, and my dad had very strict, rules on how to handle those records. If you didn't handle them that way and clean them every single time.
You didn't
get to handle the records, which is fair enough. He spent a lot of money on those records. So as time went on, they have a TV in their house, and my mom's no longer a Jehovah's Witness. They just started storing the records, and I asked them one day if I could be the caretaker for the records. So I'm the steward of their record collection as well as mine. So I have about close to 2,200 records, I think.
Yeah, right. So what do you have in your collection, Rob?
I have all my parents' 70s, stuff from the 70s and the 80s. So, my dad liked anything from Black Sabbath to Harry Chapin to, Gordon Lightfoot. My mom liked a lot of old country, like Patsy Cline and Dolly Parton and those kind of, like those kind of things. So I really kind of got a kind of a diversity there, some of their music, and then a lot of 70s rock. And then I had my collection where, I think my first vinyl record was the one my dad gave me, was Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass Band.
Wow.
And then I think the next one that he gave me was the Beach Boys. So I had so those were my first couple of records. And then the ones I was buying, I think I started with Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA, and then like Sting. I think, some of those were like my first ones. Then I started getting into Van Halen, and my taste started getting more into metal, and I was starting to get like Def Leppard and Van Halen, and then so I've got all these vinyl records that I bought brand new in the 80s. And then I started collecting, and then I started and where I grew up, it was a kind of a simple community, so getting music was not easy, like the music I wanted to listen to. So you had to wait until someone went to the big city like Denver and came home with like a mixtape of something. You're like, you got to listen to these guys. These guys are called Judas Priest. And you're like, what? You're like, and just like, and then that's how Metallica, I was introduced to Metallica, I think in 7th grade. It was the first song I heard was Master of Puppets. And I was just like blown away. I was like, who are these guys? This is my music right here.
And did you ever dabble in playing music, like guitar or any sort of instrument?
I play the guitar. I mean, not well. I like to play around on it. I used to do vocals, used to sing a lot. I grew up doing community theater, so I grew up doing a lot of theater, a lot of musicals. So I just was kind of naturally drawn to that. And I've had a band here and there. Like we've had some interesting, like I got into like, punk. I was in, like a punk rock band, and I was playing the upright bass, but I was playing it I was playing a cello like an upright bass. Right. So because a friend of mine had gifted me a cello, and so I tuned it to the guitar, and then I would just play it like, I didn't know anything about what I was doing. I was just playing around, and I wasn't great at it, but we were just having fun.
Very, very interesting. And I also read a story about your best friend during this time, and his parents had a farm, and you would go there and visit. You'd go there all the time and visit that place, and that was really special to you.
Yeah, I had I think just growing up around agriculture and country community, there's a mentality there of everyone takes care of each other. There's a community there that I always really appreciated. And and if you were the ranch and the farm that we would go to, they would anytime that it was harvesting potato season, you'd be out there pulling potatoes, and you come home with a bag of potatoes, but you filled dozens throughout the day. And it was just that kind of thing where the community would come together and help. Same with harvesting beef. If they had a cattle, that they would bring in cow, and we would help process the cow, and we'd come home with a few packages of white wrapped beef. And I just always loved that. I just living in that community was really special.
I was going to say, do you miss that sort of lifestyle? Just a laid back, really nice lifestyle.
I do. I live in the city in Denver, and I'm always pining away for the country, but I've got to be close to an airport.
Sure. Yes.
And so I just can't really. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be living. I would love to live back where I grew up. Actually, that's my parents are still there. My sister's there. Her kids are there. I love it over there, but I need to be near an airport.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more question. I found this story very interesting, and I want you to expand on it, or maybe it's not true. But your best friend that had the ranch, you got your first, not taste, but a smell or an aurora of whiskey for the first time from his grandfather's breath. Tell me the story about this.
Yes, and I think more to that point, his grandpa was larger than life. I mean, he was the kind of guy that would, he was up at 5 o'clock in the morning and he was already out there with the cattle, and he was kind of a prankster, had a really good sense of humor, and he was always laughing. And just really special times in that kitchen, just like having breakfast with all the ranch, it's a family. They didn't really have ranch hands. It was, it was all the brothers and sisters and kids. So it was always like a big thing going on. And then at night, they'd have a couple of whiskeys and things like that. And I just remember him laughing and smelling his breath. And that's probably, I definitely, that's where I first smelled whiskey. Like I could smell it. But then when I started to get into my exploratory years, we knew where he stashed that whiskey. And so my and I, we would try it and we're like, oh, this is awful. Like, as a kid, you're like, like, how do people like this? How do they drink this stuff? The smell was pleasant on his breath, but it was certainly not pleasant to try. I was probably in, again, probably around 7th grade or so, probably, 13, 14.
So how did you get around that? Just drink more and get used to the taste?
I think so over time. I mean, where we would have keggers out in the, these parties out in the boondocks, and someone would have a keg in the back of a pickup truck, and you'd buy your solo cup, and they'd fill up a solo cup of beer, and so I think you just started getting used to what alcohol tastes like. I think when you're younger, you're going for effect, not for quality, and then eventually you're like, oh, I actually, I'm supposed to be enjoying this.
Yeah.
And you find a way to enjoy, and once I first started drinking whiskey, I had a friend of mine who, I used to just get whiskey and Coke, in a bar somewhere, like you just don't know any better. Yeah. And I think everybody starts out, at some point of, there's always that learning curve of enjoying whiskey and knowing what you actually like. And that that journey is always that's a fun journey. I think I had a friend who said one day, he's like, no, this is a bottle of bourbon, and, you drink it neat, and here's how you drink it. And so no one had ever shown me that before. I was always going to the bar for effect. And now I was like, oh, this is really nice. This is a whole new experience. I feel like, it was a very similar experience to like probably, like the Wizard of Oz, when they went black and white the color, I was like, oh, there's a world here that I can explore and explore for myself. And so that's where my journey with whiskey began.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go a little bit forward after that. So I do read that 21, you made the decision to go on 2 tours during the military service, the U.S. Army, the 10th Mountain Division from 1992 to 1995.
Correct.
So, country boy, grown up in a music background, where did this decision come from? Like, was it the right time? Was it something that you've always wanted to do, or tell us about that?
It was something that I had always wanted to do. It was always there. I was always fascinated with my grandfather was in World War II as a pilot. My other grandfather was also in the Army. So I kind of grew up around some of those influences. My uncle was in the Army. I think I had always been kind of fascinated by what they had done with those, with their careers. And at the time I had moved out of my parents' house. I was living in Denver. I was kind of in the punk rock scene in Denver, and
come on,
getting in trouble. I was getting myself in trouble, and I recognized that I was looking for some discipline. I was looking for a direction. I was looking for some adventure.
Yes.
I hadn't really planned on going career or anything. I just wanted to experience the military, and so I went and joined in 92, and literally went through basic training, my advanced training for my job, which was target acquisition. And directly from target acquisition, I was shipped to my unit at 10th Mountain Division. We were ski and mountaineering troops. We were trained for mountain warfare, snow, harsh winter conditions. And I found myself very, very shortly, very quickly in Africa, in the desert. Wow. With no snow, no mountains. and I was in Somalia, and we were supposed to go over in December of '92, and ended up in January of '93 is when my first deployment. But I did 2 deployments to Somalia. People probably would recognize that more by the movie Black Hawk Down.
Right.
I was we participated in that in that battle, providing support for the special forces who were being pulled out of there. So we really had a very busy couple of deployments there, and then came back to Fort Drum, upstate New York, for a while after that second deployment, and then we were deployed to Haiti in '94.
Right.
So 1994 I was in Haiti, and we after Somalia we called it the Haitian vacation, because it was not nearly as intense as Somalia was, even though it had its own intensity for sure.
Yeah.
Someone threw a grenade at us in Haiti, and I think that was like the main, we had another, that was nothing compared to Somalia. So we were like, it's funny. You just think, on the grand scale of things, it was not nearly what we went through in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. What were some of the lessons that you learned from doing those 2 tours?
I think the first one was, as a young man, I accepted my mortality. I think there was a lot of fear when I first got there. We were being shot at, snipers shooting at us while we were in our tents. You're hitting the deck all the time, and there was this constant high alert fear. And there was a certain point where I was in my cot and I was reading, and they were, the Somalians were very fond of taking an AK-47 and just spraying an entire magazine over the wall at whatever tents were over there. And there was just one point where I realized that I was really tired of being afraid. I didn't want to be afraid anymore. So and in that moment I was reading, and I just folded the book down on my chest instead of dropping down, and because I knew it was only just one magazine. They weren't actually attacking. That's what they always did. And I just stayed there and I waited till they were done. And then I went back to reading. And that was like the moment where if I hit the floor, or if I'm laying in my cot, either way, they could still shoot me. So, I'm not going to be afraid anymore. And then that moment, I think, accepted my mortality. And that was a huge lesson for me. It honestly gave me a freedom. It gave me a freedom to, anything after that was going to be a gift, a gift of life. And so I approached life that way, that everything after I came back from Somalia and knowing that I had survived it, that was a gift, and everything else was going to be this great big adventure that I'm still on.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I had a friend that was in the army as well. When he come back to work, his attitude changed a lot. He had this saying of, early is on time is late. And it all of a sudden got very, very disciplined. You had to be respectful. Did you have that similar feeling?
Without a doubt. That has probably been the strongest part of my work ethos, my work ethics, is approaching everything. I'm always early. I'm early to everything. And just because I always leave buffers, you never know what's going to happen. You have to be there. Yeah. I'm always 10 to 15 minutes early to every doctor's appointment, every appointment, everywhere I'm supposed to be. I'm generally early or standing by, ready to to go. And I think that's really what's led me on this path. I had a career in the music industry before I was making whiskey. I worked as a stagehand, worked as a rigger. Worked doing all these great and working with all these great bands. And a lot of that was because I would show up. I would do the work. I would show up on time. I would do the work. I had no problem working crazy hours, 8 a.m. to 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's what really, having that discipline led me to making whiskey, because I met the owner of Stranahan's Colorado Whiskey in a bar. And we were talking about our mutual love of motorcycles and vintage vehicles. And he was telling me about his distillery. And I came down and helped with a bottling one time. And I was like, I need to know how to do this. I want to learn how to make whiskey. I want to learn how to distill. And he said, well, I only have 2 shifts a day and they're already full. Like, I don't need any more people. And then I started doing the math. and I started, I was helping out with the bottling a lot more. I was working for whiskey. I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, if you don't shut the stills down, because you have to fire the stills up in the morning, it takes 4 hours for it to heat up. Then you have that's your 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. shift. Then you have your 5 p.m., like there was a first shift and a second shift. And I started thinking about it. It's like, what you need is to keep the stills running the entire time so they never cool down. And that would be a 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. shift. And
wow.
And you could produce maybe 3 to 6 more barrels of whiskey a week if you kept this shift going.
Right.
And so I went to him and I said, hey, what do you think about making a third shift, 1 a.m. to 9 a.m., and I will be your guy to do that shift. And once he looked at the math, he's like, you're willing to do that? And I said, yeah, I'm willing to do that. You teach me how to make whiskey. I will be your night guy. And so he said, yeah, let's do it. So they trained me how to distill. I took over we created that shift 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. And I did that shift for 4 years.
Wow.
Before, that was 4 years of living in, when everybody else is asleep, you're awake and working. And then coming out of work at 9 in the morning. I lived on a horse ranch at the time. So I would go and come home. I'd sleep for a couple of hours. Then I'd go muck out stalls and do whatever I needed to do. And then I'd go back to sleep before I'd have to go back to work. So it was a very strange period of time, but it led to learning my craft and then evolving from there up to being the head distiller and the master distiller and so on. So that was kind of a long, convoluted answer to your question.
Yeah, that was a great answer, by the way. Just getting back to that, when you come back to the US, I read that you took a couple of years off and you bought a school bus. Is that true? And you turned it into you're living in this school bus.
I did. So I bought that before my second tour to Somalia. So right. We were locked down on base because we were supposed to deploy within, we were not allowed to leave the base. Well, we all had girlfriends at the time. And so, and there was a carnival that was happening in the town nearby the base. And we all snuck off of posts to go meet up with our girlfriends and go to this carnival. And we weren't supposed to leave post at all. And we ended up, I was on this ride and I remember Pantera was actually playing like,
nice.
And on this thing, and this ride would come up to a certain point and I could look over into this guy's backyard and he had this half-size school bus that had a for sale sign in it. And I thought, oh, that is the coolest thing. And as this ride's going, I'm like, oh my God. So as soon as I got off that ride, I went over and climbed up on that fence and looked over at the bus. And the next day I snuck off of post again and I went and I bought it for $800 from this guy. And then I begged him to keep it at his house. I didn't have any place to put it at the time. And I told him, I was like, hey, I'm being deployed to Somalia. Would you be kind enough to keep it here? And I'll pay you an extra $100 when I get back. And he did. He was very kind. And I said, I'm going to be gone a month tops. Well, that was not the case. I was gone, almost, I think 6 months. So, he wasn't too happy about that. But when I came back, I took the bus. I registered it, had it in the barracks parking lot. And then I'd run an extension cord up to my barracks window. I was on the second floor, and I gutted the whole bus, and I found this farmer who was knocking down an old barn, and at the time, they were just burning old barnwood. It wasn't collectible, and people collect it now. So, kind of like my background here is barnwood. And so I built the interior out of old barnwood and built a kitchen and a bed. And first thing I put in there was a sound system so I could have music. And that bus, we used to drive it up to Canada, over the border, and go up to Kingston, Ontario, and that bus, I had a lot of fun with it before I started building it out. And when I got out in the summer of '95 out of the Army, the bus was ready to go. I knew that I was going to head to Colorado, visit with my family for a little bit. And then my plan had been to drive the bus from upstate New York across the country and then up to Alaska.
Oh,
and
yeah, right.
I was obsessed with the TV show Northern Exposure, and I was in love with that show, and I was like, I'm moving to Alaska, and I ran out of money in Oregon, and that's where so I lived in and I started working as a carpenter and learning how to surf up there, and but it was incredible. I lived on that bus for a couple of years, and it was some of the best time in my life because I was before cell phones, before really the internet was a big thing. So I really truly was free. Like I didn't have an address. I didn't have a phone. I was just freewheeling, and had a really good partner at the time. She was great. Very understanding. We live in this kind of romantic lifestyle in the bus. And that's what I was, and, when I started the music biz, I was living in that bus.
Yeah, right. So 2 questions. So what was it like living in Oregon? Because one of my best friends is from there. I've never actually been there, but he speaks the world of this place. You mentioned surfing as well. Have you done any surfing with Rob or Kirk?
I have not.
No, not yet.
I have not gone surfing with them. We've talked about it, and when I told Rob Trujillo that, I was like, I learned how to surf up in Oregon. He's like, oh man, that's some cold water. And it is. It's, the Oregon coast is known for some really cold water up there. So, you're always wearing a 3 mil wetsuit and a hoodie and boots because you just can't stay in the water that long without it. So I wasn't a great surfer. I liked being out there. I liked getting out there. I grew up skiing and snowboarding, but that's different where you're on skis and you are moving over the land, whereas the water is moving under you. So I think that took me a while to get to kind of switch my brain and my thinking. But I've surfed a few times since, I've surfed down in Costa Rica, I've surfed in Hawaii, surfed down in Mexico, in Oaxaca. Being landlocked in Colorado, there's not a whole lot of opportunity to surf. So I think my surfing skills have gotten incredibly rusty.
Well, I'll invite you to surf in Australia. I've got some pretty cool spots down there. I will invite you to have a surf with me.
That's what I've always heard. I've always seen, I was obsessed with the movie Point Break when I was a kid, and that end scene where he's on the wave, you're just like, wow.
Bells Beach in South Australia, yeah. Incredible.
So cool. Well, I appreciate the invite. Thank you.
All right.
I might be paddling around more than surfing, but we'll see how I may have to practice my jump.
Yes. I'm the same. I'm more of like a boogie board rider rather than a surfer, but we'll see how we go. But it'll be perfect weather down there mid-November, so yeah, it should be great.
I made a boogie board. So where I was stationed in Somalia, we were in Mogadishu, and we had a radar system that was on the highest point in the airfield in Mogadishu, and right down below us was this little bay, and so we would go swimming all the time. And I made a boogie board out of empty plastic water bottles. So once they were empty, you just screw the lid back on, and so they were, it was a hollow, air.
Oh, yeah.
And I took MRE boxes, which were really thick cardboard that carried our military rations, our food rations, and it was really thick cardboard. So I cut it in the shape of a boogie board and just duct taped the whole thing together with the water bottles inside, and it floated. It actually worked.
Yeah, right.
So I actually used that thing for a while until water started seeping in past the tape and sogging up the cardboard. But it wasn't, I used that thing quite a bit for a while until eventually just disintegrated.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about your music, like the management side of it. So it says here, you then moved to San Francisco to work with Bill Graham Presents. And you were the event manager, you're the rigger. So tell us some of the bands or some of the artists that you worked with during that period.
I was very fortunate. We had some great timing. This was we ended up meeting the wife of the guy who was running Bill Graham Presents at the time, and this was in 1996 in a coffee shop. And so we just hit it off with her, and we had she said, "Hey, are you guys looking for work? My husband is managing this huge concert, and we need more stagehands. We need all the people we can get." So we were like, "Yes, absolutely."
Yeah.
So when we got on site, they said, "Okay, what's your skill set?" And I was like, "Well, I can rock climb. I have my climbing gear." And like, "Oh, okay, you're a rigger." And I was like, "Cool,
Nice.
I was like, they're like, "You're like, we need you to climb that steel and build that thing." And I was like, "Wait, I can get paid to climb?" Because I love climbing. I was always climbing stuff. I was always, I did a lot of rock climbing, a lot of mountaineering, and so I was just ecstatic that I could get paid to get to climb. So that's where I started, was building the Tibetan Freedom Concert in Golden Gate Park. The Beastie Boys put on, and it was Red Hot Chili Peppers and the Smashing Pumpkins and BB King, and then you had like these San Francisco historical figures like Wavy Gravy and Yoko Ono and Sonic Youth, all these great bands that were just like,
that's a mixture of bands right there, of artists right there.
It was incredible. Yeah, like it was a really great experience, and I was hooked. I was like, because coming out of the military and the kind of the chaos of combat zones, and you're looking for something that's exciting. Just working a regular job just didn't feel somehow. And so this job kind of gave me enough of the chaos I was craving, and the spirit of music. You're constantly around all these great, incredible musicians. So working in San Francisco, I was working with Ben Harper was coming out at the time, and then I started managing different events. They had the Jane's Addiction reunion tour with Dave Navarro and Flea, and the Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters ended up opening up for them, and they're known for dosing people with acid, with LSD, and that happened at that show. Like we ended up getting anybody who had a radio who looked like they were in charge. They were dosing them with liquid acid.
Yeah,
and I'm very familiar with my hallucinogens. I'm well versed in it, so I knew how to roll with it. But they created this kind of chaos from the inside out, from all the management, and it's kind of a legendary story with Bill Graham Presents, because almost everybody ended up tripping on acid that night. Anybody who was in management. So, and not that we wanted to, but that's what happened. So it was a lot of it is like to tour with James Brown for a while as their backline guy. Setting up all their gear, all their music gear, and just working with a lot of people, a lot of these incredible legendary musicians who were kind of at the end of their career, like Etta James and things like that. And then also bands who were at the beginning of their career, like 311, and bands that were like just starting and getting to work with like Social Distortion and Motorhead, and doing lights, doing lights at some of these shows, and just really these incredible experiences of and as a matter of fact, I worked Metallica in 1996 as I rigger. That was when they were touring with Lollapalooza. So it was like Soundgarden, Devo, Green Day, and Metallica. And I was a huge Metallica fan. Am a Metallica fan, and seeing. And so I was one of the riggers, but I also got to be one of the guys who were their personal stage crew to push their boxes on stage. When they're swapping out the band equipment, the gear. So I was really excited to get to be, I got some of the Metallica guitar picks off the stage, and one of Jason Newsted's bass strings. I made a necklace out of it, and with a guitar pick, and I gave it to my sister for Christmas. So it was an incredible experience to get to be, from the mid 90s to, roughly around 2005, 2003 or 4, to be in the music industry. It was a really good time to be just a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's incredible. And I've always wanted to do that as well. And I haven't. Doing the podcast now, I get to go into different shows, not actually be a part of the show, And how long did you stay in San Francisco for?
I stayed there for a summer and into the winter. I was living in my bus, kind of living around north of San Francisco, and again, I was just living out of my vehicle, and I wasn't living in campgrounds or anything. So I was kind of strategically parking my bus around the city, and that got kind of old after a while because it's not legal. So, so people were, I was, you get the 4 a.m. knock on the window and it's the cops and like you need you to move your rig and go somewhere else, or, so a lot of that. And so I was pretty good at finding places outside the city to park but that bus I painted it green and purple to piss the Army off at the time. It wasn't to piss them off. It was more to just show the Army that like, I was really good at what I did. I was great at my job in the military, but at the same time, I wanted it to be clear that I was my own person, that I was an individual, that I was creative. And so so that bus did stand out. Yeah. And so I needed to be strategic about where I parked it.
Right. Where is that bus now?
That bus is sitting on a friend of mine's property at 9,000 feet above sea level in the Rocky Mountains. And he's got 40 acres up there. It was used we used it as a camper up there for many years, like a cabin. Somebody trespassed on the property one day and shot every single window out of the bus. So, so it's been like overtaken by pack rats and things. And every once in a while I think, man, it'd be cool to go up and fix it up, but just the amount of work that it would take. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's just, so I've taken a bunch of parts off of it and things as memorabilia. I think that's just where the bus is going to, spend the rest of its days.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd love to check it out one day. So let's move forward. So then it's all about your distiller days. So I do read that your first opportunity was with Dramaheim, Colorado.
Oh, Stranahan's?
Yes.
Yep. Stranahan's.
That was your first opportunity, right?
That was, yeah. That's when I was describing meeting the owner in a in a bar. That was the place, and Stranahan's was really. I was very fortunate. That was good timing. Again, I think everything have its right time, right place, and the mindset to take on something new and learn something new. And that's what I did. Starting out as that night distiller, did that for 4 years, and then I moved into a day position. Then I started working as the bottling manager and the maintenance engineer. And I'm not an engineer. I that's a very fancy word for just maintenance. I can fix things. I can look at things and say, okay, well, it's a machine. We can figure it out. Because I've always been a gearhead. Always worked on motorcycles. Always worked on vintage cars. I've always had the ability to just like, well, this is doing this, so it's got to be fuel, air, spark. What is this? And then same with just the facilities. And then it kind of moved up from there to being the head distiller, and then over time became the master distiller at Stranahan's. And it was for me, that's where I learned how to blend whiskey, and I was doing different cast finishes, taking single malt whiskey and I was like, okay, I'm going to cast finish in this Tempranillo wine barrel, or this cognac barrel, or this Pinot Noir barrel. Like I always had these different cask finishes, and then I would blend them together, and then we would do these special releases at the distillery. And that was for me a really incredible experience to get to learn how the craft of blending. And that's what led me to all my paths kind of led to Blackened Whiskey, where my blending and my distilling career, my reputation I had there, my music career, it was kind of like everything coming full circle right back to all of those things kind of coming into play.
Yeah. So this was Jake Norris, right? Who you worked with?
Yep. Jake Norris. He was one of the. Jess Graber was the founder of Stranahan's, and Jake Norris was the head distiller. Right. And he was the guy. We started working on motorcycles together. I had a motorcycle that my buddy and I had built. That was a diesel engine that we were running on vegetable oil, and so you would start it up on diesel fuel, and then you'd switch it to vegetable oil, and it smelled like French fries as you're going down the road. And that was, so I was into alternative fuel and just, learning, and distillation just was a natural segue for that. Yeah.
And now I can see why you and James Hetfield get along so well. Talking about motorbikes, smoking cigars and old rock music. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure
we really did hit it off over our many mutual interests for sure.
Yeah, just getting ahead, I did read that James is actually the one that's the most, he comes in with ideas and sort of checks with the Blackened Whiskey the most out of all the other band members. Is that true?
They all do. They all check in
Yeah.
with it. They're all very passionate about it. They're very proud of the brand. It's not all of them drink, but they understand that that people in their fan base do drink. That there are people that do drink, and
Yeah.
it's just another way to connect to their community. And they're always very, very much involved with the branding and the imagery and the look of it. They leave the tasting and the blending up to me. That's that was one of their things, was that like we know how to make music, but we don't know anything about making whiskey. So we need someone who knows how to make whiskey. And I've been making whiskey for 18 years now.
Yeah.
So it's very refreshing to get to work with people who have the artistic mindset, because I look at making whiskey as an art form. It's creating art. Just art you can enjoy and imbibe.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask, and maybe you can just answer like a short answer, how you found out about getting the master distiller of Blackened. Yeah, because I do read that you were handpicked. So obviously it was your amazing reputation that you got the job.
I did have a reputation in the industry, and a mutual friend of James and myself, when they were talking about making whiskey, they said, hey, you should check out this Rob guy. Initially they went with Dave Pickerel, who was a legendary distiller who passed away 2 months after they launched the brand. Yeah. And I had spoken to their director of sales, and he said, I love everything you've been doing at Stranahan's. We'd love to see, would you be interested in this? And at the time they said, we're looking at about a dozen different distillers. And so I went through this interview process several times, and then I got a call. I was in Oaxaca, Mexico.
Wow.
I was
doing down there? Was it vacation or?
I was down there. Yeah, I was actually working on creating a mezcal brand to bring to the United States, and I got the phone call. Hey, can you come to HQ, the recording studio, and an interview with the band? And I said, absolutely. So when I got back from Mexico, we set up a time. And at the time, it was my understanding that they were looking at 3 distillers, and it was kind of narrowed down to 3. So I thought, in my mind, that they were going to interview all 3 of us and figure out which one they wanted to go with. That's what my understanding was. And I rented a car in Oregon and drove down the coast, listened to Metallica the whole time, drove all the way to San Rafael, was so excited, just to have the opportunity to get to interview, and I in my mind, I was like, at the very least, I get to meet the band, and I get to, have a good experience, and whether I get the job or not, I'm just gonna be myself. And so I interviewed each person individually, and I hit it off with James. We were sitting there, we were talking about cars and motorcycles and all these things. And he at the end, he stood up and he said, hey, he said, I understand you served overseas, that you were in combat. And I said, yeah. And he said, I have something for you. And he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a coin, and he gives it through a handshake, which is the way you receive a challenge coin. And he gave me this hug, and he said, welcome to the family.
Wow.
And that is how I knew that I had the job, was James giving me this coin. And the coin was a Metallica coin. It said, I am family, forever trust in who we are. Nothing else matters. And it was just an incredible experience. I still get goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's how I found out I had the job, was James welcomed me to the family. So really just a humbling, incredible experience.
And then was it straight away get into it, or did you have to learn about what was done before? Because from what I've read, you keep what they did originally, but you've also added your flavor and your originality to the style of whiskey.
Yes. So, there was the base creation that Dave had created. And then when I took it over, I made some adjustments, to, and you're always going to in a blend, when you're blending different whiskeys from different states and different areas, over time, you are going to adjust that blend, which is what I did. I kind of immediately started working on that. and fine tuning it, which I know Dave would have been doing as well. You know, that's just what you do. You would fine tune. And so I started fine tuning the recipe, started creating my own. You know, Rye The Lightning was one of my favorite creations. You know, that one was a 95% rye with I did a cask finish of Madeira casks and rum casks. So it was, you know, very, and doing the collaborations with other master distillers, the Masters of Whiskey series.
Yes.
It's just been an incredible journey to get to create and any ideas that I might come up with, play around with.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you've got the batch 100, batch 106, and they come with like a vinyl, Blackened Castrate, Blackened X, Willet collaboration. As you just said, the Master of Whiskey. So, but what I want to talk about, and this is what I wanted to ask you this whole interview, is about the Metallica Black Noise sonic enhancement process. Now, I haven't been to any of your events yet, but I'm just fascinated to hear your story about how this was created and how this will come about.
Well, that was originally an idea from Dave Pickrell. He had been inspired by, there's a cathedral at West Point, and when he was a soldier there, and the cathedral, that the caretaker of the cathedral, there was a pipe organ in there, that the pipe organ, you know, the organ pipes would go up the side of the wall, and he would, you know, he'd press this key on the organ and it would vibrate the building. So he was, you know, he's like, look, I can't play this key for very long because I'm afraid to bring the building down. And that always kind of stuck with Dave, that sound creates movement. And so that was something they started to play around with. And of course, that was the first thing I started researching. I knew how to make whiskey, grain to bottle, you know, blending, distillation, barrel aging, but sonic enhancement, you know, with my music background, it was very intriguing to me. And I wanted to understand that this was a process that really worked, you know, and that was what was incredible, is that in the research, you know, so I've done my own research. You know, for example, I took 2 barrels of whiskey. This was 5-year-old whiskey, all the same batch, you know, just 3 different barrels. I took 2 barrels. I put them in a room where I had sonic enhancement. That's low frequency. So anybody who's ever been to a concert, especially a Metallica concert, and you feel that heavy bass tones, right? That vibration in your chest. You feel that. That's movement in your chest.
Absolutely.
That's what we're replicating inside the barrel, is that movement. And so when you're creating vibration and at a certain frequency, you can move. You can get better interaction with the whiskey and the wood. So we're penetrating deeper into the wood. We're picking up more color, more flavor. And we have 9 different flavor profile markers that we can measure, you know, on a different level to understand the changes that are happening in the whiskey inside the barrel. And so those 3 barrels, we had our 2 barrels doing sonic enhancement. And I had what I call a control barrel that was not receiving sonic enhancement. I took samples from all those barrels in the very beginning. So we had our base marker of what the profiles were like, in the beginning. Over the course of 60 plus days, I was taking samples from the barrels every week. And then once I had all my samples, we sent them out to a lab. We were able to identify over time that the 9 flavor profile markers that identify, you know, the barrel aging, every one of those were elevated in our sonic enhanced barrels, which was proof that sonic enhancement was making a difference and a change within the aging process of the whiskey. So it was really fascinating to me. I mean, it led me down to so many rabbit holes. I was all the way to, like, you know, where the pyramids in Egypt made with sound and sonic enhancement, moving snow. You know, so I was really fascinated with what frequency can do. And I'm still very fascinated. I still do a lot of research on it. And I think we're just scratching the surface on what we could possibly do, you know, taking these traditional methods of distillation and aging, but applying modern science to it in a calculated effort, and working with Meyer Sound, who creates that wall of sound for Metallica, to create the proprietary, you know, equipment. So it's been a process that I've just been so fascinated with, and have really, you know, and I want to do more. Like, I want to create an entire, you know, a building that's designed sonically for enhancement. So there's so many things that I haven't even begun to like get to do, because it costs money, you know, like on a larger scale like that, it takes a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And in saying you were talking earlier about Rye The Lightning that won an award.
2022.
2022, right? Sorry.
2022. It won the best rye whiskey in the world by Whiskey Advocate magazine, and it was chosen as one of the top 20 best whiskeys in the world.
Wow,
so
that's an amazing achievement.
And it was really just incredible and such an honor to be able to receive that. And it's just so exciting to be a part of the top 20 whiskeys in the world. I was like, wow, this is great. And the only rye whiskey that was selected. There were some really large name brand scotches and bourbons in that lineup. And to be a part of that was really just very kind of humbling,
Yeah. And also it got re-released last year. That's probably what I'm thinking. Is that correct? You had to re-release it? Or?
We did another version of it.
Right.
And that was, I wanted to release a limited, release of the Rye The Lightning every year to just, keep it going out there. We haven't released one this year. We're kind of, the spirits industry has been, heavily affected, from kind of the accordion of time from COVID. So we kind of held off on it this time, but we're hoping to get back on it for next year.
Sorry, just quickly, how did that get affected with COVID? Did it shut the whole industry down, or?
It was it changed where people were drinking. So, people were used to going to restaurants and bars and drinking. It didn't stop people from drinking. They were just drinking at home. And so I think a lot of people were getting better at their making cocktails and their home setups. And, I built this cigar bar during COVID. So I had a place to, in Colorado, a place to smoke during the winter and have create cocktails and that sort of thing. So I think, it just changed how people were drinking is what happened. Right. And now people are, it's kind of everything's kind of catching up and resetting itself, I think is what the industry is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, my next question is, so what's the plans for the future then? Are you already working on some new whiskeys or confidential at this stage?
Nothing I can speak officially about, but yes, we're working on something. I've always got some projects in the wings, so to speak. And yes, I've got something I'm working on, but not at liberty to talk about it yet.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
No worries. Yeah. And just to go back to where we can see you on the Metallica Takeover. So when is your next one? In Nashville, right? This weekend.
That's correct. Yep, it'll be Nashville on Friday at 5 p.m. A place called Smoker's Abbey. I will be there, enjoying some cigars and a little bit of whiskey with folks, and there to share our mutual love for Metallica and cigars. So it's going to be a good and that'll be this Friday. I fly to Nashville tomorrow, so it'll be good.
And what does the event entail there? Is it tasting? So what happens in the event?
They're always different. So I never know until, a lot of times I don't know until I actually walk through the door. I'm well-versed in being able to discuss the cigars, discuss the whiskey, and just, get to hang out with some fun folks. And so I see a lot of familiar faces all over the country. And, there's Metallica fans that are at every single show, which is so impressive. And they're like family, and I get to see a lot of those guys will come out and enjoy a cigar and enjoy some time with us. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. It's always a reunion,
Rob, all my friends are asking me if I'm coming to the US for this tour, and it's like, I'm going to try my best. Your home city, Denver, is the last stop on the tour. I'm going to try really, really hard to get there. So I've got my I Disappear ticket. Just a matter of getting over there. Yeah, fingers crossed.
Excellent. Yes, well, I hope that's the case. I've become good friends with Squindo, the artist.
Oh, yes.
Who does the posters and T-shirts and things. And I think he's going to be out here in Denver. He's starting to get a lot of meet the artist kind of events as well. So I know he'll be here in Denver. So I'm excited to see him here and just a lot of good folks. I know it's the last show on the U.S. tour. And so a lot of people are going to be here. So I really I get to kind of host in my backyard, so to speak.
Come on, yes. Some cliche questions, Rob. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oh, wow. I think one of the best is learning how to listen. Learning how to listen to people and not just having something to say, but hearing what people have to say and being open to learn. I think that's you're always going to keep learning. There's always something to learn. And I think being open-minded and listening to points of view that you might not normally listen to, because it could open up your mind into another, form of thought. So I think being respectful, listening to, one thing I think that we've kind of lost culturally is listening to the stories of our elders. The last show I was at in Syracuse, there were friends and family room. There's a lot of folks in there that I'm like, and I met just by taking the time to just talk and meet people in there and sit down and listen and have a conversation. I met the guy who produced the album Kill 'Em All. And he told me in great detail where he did it, how he did it. There was an abandoned warehouse and how he set up Lars in the bathroom. They took out all the stalls, and just, and that was just because it's listening and listening to these stories. People have something to say, and people, I think they're moving so fast. Sometimes they don't take the time to sit down and listen. So that would be best advice.
Absolutely. And if you were to go back in time and visit a 14 or 13-year-old Rob, what advice would you give him? To trust your artistic creativity, to trust that if you are inspired by something, to continue to follow through with it. And I think when I've come up with ideas and followed through with them, and it's always blossomed in my life. Like, for example, the school bus, right? I had guys in my unit who were like, "You're absolutely crazy. What are you planning on doing with that thing? Like, why'd you buy that bus? Why'd you buy that big thing?" And I was like, "I'm going to live in it, and I'm going to go travel the world. I'm going to go see the world with it." And I had one of my buddies years later. He's like, "Man, I never thought you were going to even leave the state, let alone, or leave the base, let alone the state." And the fact that and I think it's just, I would tell my 13-year-old self, like, life is going to be freaking awesome, man. And just, trust your instinct, and it's okay to fail, be okay with learning those mistakes, because that's what makes us human. Absolutely. And I just heard your dog bark as well. He's a beautiful dog. I saw some pictures on your Instagram. Beautiful dog.
Colin Robinson. Colin Robinson after the energy vampire from What We Do in the Shadows. And he is a lot of fun. I'm training him in the sidecar. I've got a motorcycle with a sidecar, and I've been training him with goggles and getting him comfortable in the sidecar. So he's great. Yeah.
Social medias, Rob, where can we find you online?
So my social media is
and our international listeners as well.
Yes. So Instagram for me is Whiskey Rob. So I'm at Whiskey Rob for Instagram. We're also Blackened Whiskey on Instagram, and then we've got you can go to blackenedwhiskey.com. I'm working on getting my website up so I can. I'm working on a few projects that I'm excited about coming up here in the future. But the best way is Whiskey Rob on Instagram.
All right, and just some quick questions, little short questions. You like your top 2 or 3 favorite, and then I'll let you go. I'll get out of here. Okay, so as of today, what are your top 2 or 3 favorite albums of all time?
Oh man, Led Zeppelin 1. I think that was as a kid, that was just like, there's just this feel to Led Zeppelin that they just were this thing that was just its own entity in itself. So I definitely Metallica. That's a hard one because Metallica, love Kill 'Em All. Master of Puppets was my first album, but I think the Black Album is one of my favorites on that. And it gets a little old sometimes, but Bob Marley Legend is just
classic.
That has been a transforming album for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about the first album that you bought. What was the last album that you bought?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I bought 72 Seasons. I had to have it on vinyl, right? So I definitely had that one. And and then we talked about that Batch 100 vinyl record.
Yes.
I got to select the songs on that. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was great. Lars did the arrangement, and we did a 2 vinyl record. I got to dedicate those songs to people in my life, and to everyone. So I think
your top 2 or 3 places that you visited, and then 2 or 3 places that you want to visit in the future.
Well, I'm really excited. I believe I'll be in Australia, so I've wanted to go to Australia my whole life, so I'm very excited about that. Alaska is on the list. I've somehow missed Alaska. Somehow I've tried to get there, as I was talking about earlier, in the bus, and I still haven't gotten there. So that's on the list. And then there's places that I just would love to go to, like Norway, and there's just other places that I think, Mongolia has always been intriguing to me. I've always one of my goals still is to do a round the world trip on a motorcycle, and I think I still have time to do that.
Drive up to Alaska. There you go.
Exactly.
Right up to Alaska. Yep. Yeah. I know this is a difficult question, but your top 3 all-time favorite live shows of all time.
James Brown.
Wow.
I think I just, when I got to work with James Brown as their backline guy, and that just the energy that James Brown would bring was just mind blowing. And again, that Tibetan Freedom concert was just that was a life-changing moment for me. So getting to see all these great bands and getting to work with them, I think that was another one that was just kind of mind blowing to me. I think honestly, another Lollapalooza was Lollapalooza 2, Ministry. It was L7, Ministry, Pearl Jam, and Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Wow, all in their peak time. Yeah, Pearl Jam. Yeah, wow. Yeah. Great lineup.
There's 4. The more I think about it, I'm like, oh, there's this show and then this show.
Yeah. And you could probably do one for like just Metallica. You could do your top 3 best shows from that. So, yes,
exactly.
It's a very broad question. Last one, Rob.
Yes.
Who's your greatest inspirational hero and why?
Oh wow, Anthony Bourdain. I think he's someone that really took his passion and he was kind of a pirate, in the kitchen and took his career to really exploring the world and his passion to the world and connecting with the human condition and connecting over food. He's someone I've just always been inspired by his writing style, his passion for people. And I'd say he's one of my biggest inspirations.
Great way to finish it off, Rob. And your story is also very inspiring as well. From where you've come, you've served for your country, doing things that not only make you happy, but make everybody else happy. Being a part of the Metallica family, I would love to get to Denver. I'm still not sure, but I definitely would love to have a whiskey with you in Denver. If not, let's go surfing in Australia.
That sounds fantastic, my friend. That sounds incredible. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. And that's what I love about the Metallica community is that at some point you will get to meet these people, at some point you're going to cross paths just by being out there.
The Metallica family is so good. I've met so many friends.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Rob, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to meeting you very soon.
Craig, it was such a pleasure, and thank you for the wonderful questions and the inspiration. I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Nigel the Shanghai Psychic. I can tune into your loved ones in the spirit world, but I can also tune into you, tell you about your path and the choices that you need to make and need to know. I'm currently giving 30% discount on all Tell Craig Your Story listeners. Just use the code Tell Craig Your Story for 30% off your first psychic reading with me online at Nigel the Shanghai Psychic.